Yeah, I was. Oh damn! Now I have to like write a note. Oh my god! Then it's so much work sometimes.
Not even 10 seconds in, I've already photobombed it. It's gonna be one of those episodes.
Oh my god! Make a note. Well, just so people don't like sense themselves totally, but just be aware that, yeah, to put this on YouTube, I have to. Well, but anything spicier, I usually paywall, so it's all right. Apart from like, well,
you're gonna have to paywall the whole thing.
Yeah, but well, we'll see. It's funny.
I'll try to tone it down a little bit.
So yeah. Sometimes like people in my audience, they're like, I could tell when Gio's cutting something. Because it's like to an obstacle, and I'm like, oh my god. No, but we were talking about like OPSEC and do you remember like who's that e-girl that's like the Hegelian? Or well, I mean, do they actually read Hegel? Probably not.
No.
Nikki the Hegelian, where they were doing like a Kantian style like racial physiognomy analysis.
I only vaguely followed that stuff. I just saw women talking about philosophy, and I completely tuned out.
Yeah, but it was very funny though.
Why would I look at them?
Well, I don't know. They're all right. I mean, I guess like being into philosophy for women, it's sort of like it's like if you're a mid, it just boosts your. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't be that. I'm trying to be wholesome chungus, but I don't know. It's very funny how there's a bunch of like you can take a strange eccentric idea that appeals to neurodivergent men and create this like weird feminine chthonic cult around it. But I don't know. It's just there's something about it.
It's every man's dream to have a harem of mids that believe he's God because he knows how to read Kant.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But anyways, this is the Content Minded with Magnetic Dreamer. So Mags, I always like fumble the introduction, so I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to have the intro like right at the beginning of the podcast. But tell us a little bit about yourself. And you're like an old head, but you're like one of those obscure old heads that only like, my old head's favorite sort of deal. And I don't know, like
I'm not really an old head.
No,
I just hung around them a while because I hate normies.
Yeah, but anyways, tell us about yourself though. What's your deal? Like it's very hard to like pin down the poster that, because like a lot of people that like sub in their stack or whatever, but
they have a brand that they stick to more or less, or an image they tend to project.
Exactly. Whereas like you tend to remain a bit more imperceptible, and I think that's probably, it's probably on purpose, but yeah, like, so tell us your story. What's you go around the group. What's your favorite color? Anyway, yeah.
Oh, my favorite color is I like it when the way it feels when it comes out of my ass.
I've been an alcoholic for 5 years.
I'm a part-time alcoholic. But I would like, do you want like my journey of like how I got to this space? Or
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, I would probably say like the first real sort of like, I guess, red pill you would take. And I hesitate to use the term because somehow the fetishists have taken it back again somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the first thing that sort of like made me realize things about the world was first off, how unique the United States is compared to other countries in world history and the New World in general. Because you look at the New World, there aren't any monarchies at all, and there's no real history of them. Like, people have tried, but they've never really succeeded except in like a few cults or attempted invasions. And secondly, Kaczynski got really, most people ran into like Kaczynski or the Mouse Utopia experiments fairly late into their development. I ran into that stuff first. Like that was the first thing that I stumbled upon, and I just became enamored with because, well, he was right. And older style conspiracy theories like Bill Cooper, I guess older David Icke material, Valdemar Valerian, Phil Schneider, or not Phil Schneider, the deep underground military base guy that.
Oh, no, that's not Richard Hoagland. That's the movie.
No, not Hoagland. I've never read Hoagland.
No. I know what you're talking. I know what you're referring to, though. Yeah.
Yeah, that
very
guy.
Popular on the X board, by the way.
So I kind of wandered around for a little while, alternating between like crime think, anarchistic type thinking for a while, and then I sort of realized that like no matter how often people try to create this kind of thing, it always just devolves back into hierarchy. And I started studying history more. I realized like you literally can't stop this from occurring. It's something built into humanity, and you see it in nature. And excuse me. I read a little bit of Marx's stuff, didn't like it, left a bad taste in my mouth. He got some stuff right, but he was wrong about everything else. Surveillance capitalism stuff, conspiracy stuff, like I just kind of like I have a penchant for strange things in general, and strange things are drawn to me. So it's just kind of like a mutual give and take relationship, I suppose. So oddball Marxists, oddball conservatives, oddball libertarians. And I made a point of whenever I have a question, I go ahead and I just look at it like, oh, this country exists. I wonder what its history is like. Oh, it's got this person running it. I wonder what this country is like, what his deal is. Oh, he's actually a murderer file. Oh, and that happens way too often.
There's something,
So I just kind of oscillate between a bunch of different things because I don't trust anything at all as a general rule. Like I ran into like Mockingbird or Project Mockingbird very early on in my life, Project MK Ultra stuff. And I realized not only can I not trust the news, which duh, but I can't trust anyone's perception of the news either, or history either for that matter. So, and I also can't trust my own distrust. That's sort of like my catchphrase at this point.
That's
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like that's very interesting how this sort of like sum total control system, how even to the point where you're doubting your own perceptions of things, or the people that because we all know that like there's sort of what would you say, like there's fake dissonance being planted everywhere, and there's a lot of info traps and so forth. But go ahead.
I was an atheist for a long time until I realized that like I'm not an atheist because I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist because I feel like I'm alone and I'm projecting that out into the universe. So I sort of like I reverse engineered Pascal's wager before I knew what it was. I said like, well, if God's real and I'm acting the fool, it's a safer bet to say to act as if he is real, because at the very least, if truly nothing happens when I die, at least I acted morally rather than just sliding into sensuous barbarism, I suppose is the best way of putting it. And I wanted to figure out the origins of various stranger ideas within like conspiracy stuff. Because he kept running into like David Icke. Like I read him right after I read Bronze Age Mindset. I didn't really agree with him on much. BAP, I mean. So the two kind of like evened each other out, I suppose. And I kind of wondered like, okay, where did Icke actually get these ideas? Because he's a compiler. He's not really a thinker. He's a compiler of strange ideas.
Well, he gets it from Credo Matwa as one of his major influences.
That's one person. I can't find any information on that guy at all. He's a ghost.
People say that David Icke was ripping off Alice Bailey a lot, and I wonder if there's any validity to that. I read
Probably
David
was.
Icke as well when I was younger. I've probably all of his books as well. But
Interesting thing about Alice Bailey, I haven't bought any of her works yet, but apparently she believes in her book Initiation Human and Solar that the Freemasons get their knowledge from a Master Mason lodge in the Sirius star system.
Yeah, that does sound familiar.
Alien
Yeah.
Freemasons.
Those like those people that tried to like connect Mormonism and Freemasonry as having like a root origin, because a lot of the like, I mean, Mormonism is very interesting and complex as sort of like in a weird way like the religion that could only happen in America. But
oh yeah, it's simultaneously the most American religion you can probably create and simultaneously the most alien religion you can probably create. It's basically like vitalistic Gnosticism in a certain way. I could dive deep into Mormonism if you want, because I don't know everything about it, but I know more than the average Gentile, as they call them.
Well, we can get to it, but let's circle back, I guess, to your influence. Like, there was a time when this thinking was very popular in the E-Right. Like, I mean, being an old head, like you had a lot of people, and there's still people like, you know, the Schwab sphere and all that. There was like Koliak, but well, let's not get into that. But like, no, maybe, but I guess like there was this huge sea change to where a lot of like online dissidents, they're like, all that schizo posting is not politically useful, and therefore we should focus on either like lifestyle politics or electioneering, or, which I mean is fine, but then I noticed that like there was sort of a robbing of flavor in a weird way among like dissident circles online, because the schizo posters had built a huge foundation in things. And you mentioned Bill Cooper, for instance, was a huge influence in a lot of people. But yeah, so I guess like, why is it now so verboten? Is this because thinking outside of the box in such a weird way, it's not like, it doesn't, is it because it doesn't translate into immediate like political solution, or is it just
people are just boring?
Yeah, probably that too. Yeah,
it's like a lot of these people are like, they're soft communists. They're not quite communists, but they're like, we need to improve the material conditions of everybody, which lends itself in the general direction of Marxian thinking. Like, that's one of the issues that, like, that's one of the reasons why I oscillate between like Marxists and like super far right schizo people, is because those two sides will talk about certain things that the other side isn't even aware of existing. Like labor conflicts across the United States. The Marxists have an exclusive monopoly on the narrative about that, like Blair Mountain, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the people on, or like something that's a bit more towards the centrist thing, like surveillance capitalism, the breakdown of the measurement of all aspects of humanity into just data so that you can more effectively get people addicted to Oxycontin or whatever the hell.
Or consumer product, like, yeah, like this, like inframing of all life, as Heidegger would say. Yeah.
So I go from like super hardline people, like the people who take the weirdest stuff from like Alice Bailey and David Icke, and then I circle all the way back to Marxists, and then I circle all the way back to the, you know, I'm trying to build a dialectic almost within my own head to try to figure out where these people cross and where they can syncretize and burn off the worst of the fat that these two bloated corpses have chained to themselves.
Oh, like, yeah.
Like right next to me, I have a book by Peter Kropotkin, and right next to it is Atlantis, Edda, and Bible by Herman Wieland. That's the kind of bookshelf that I'm building.
Oh man. But that's very interesting how a lot of them do share a lot, like root assumptions and things. But you said something very interesting though, that you were reading David Icke. I'm assuming it would be like Children of the Matrix, or what was his other? Yeah. But also you're reading Bronze Age Mindset. And was there a sort of weird syncretic connection of the two? And not to like get into e-drama or anything, but what would be your critique of BAM and how were you like reading it at the same time as David Icke? Because you'd think they're like polar opposite figures in some ways, but maybe not, perhaps not. But yeah, I mean, you could say that they're
Bap
on the
is
opposite ends of things. Yeah.
Bap is clearly a very well educated or well read person. I don't know about like Costin or whatever. I don't care about that. Okay.
Right.
Death of the author, whatever the hell. I don't care. He is very weirdly, like almost voluntarily blind about like the idea of like multi-generational conspiracies or like multi-generational cults and things. And also about the influence of technology on human life. Like he talks about like owned space a lot. That's true.
Right.
That's absolutely true. So what does that mean when every single little aspect of yourself is measured at every moment of every day? Oh, well, you just got to like lift harder, dude. It's like, sure, I'm not saying you shouldn't. You should. You inspired me to. But you're almost like voluntarily ignoring the weirder stuff or the dark or like the Nicolandian stuff. David Icke is almost like, you go to David Icke, that's basically the only thing he talks about is multi-generational family conspiracy theories and New World Order, technology, police paranoia, that kind of thing. And you look at the stuff that David Icke was inspired by, because I actually went through the bibliography in the back. He is inspired by people from like the militia movement to like people that think they're talking to aliens about to rapture us. And warning about like, oh, they're about to put chips in your skin, which, I mean, look at Elon Musk. He's laundering DARPA tech right now. That's probably one of my most schizo conspiracy theories is in the 1950s and 60s, they were chipping people, but they stopped because they couldn't get it to work. And now they're doing it again. That's probably one of my more fun ideas.
Or there was something in the, how can I say this for YouTube? There was a lot of experimental jib jabs going on, and who knows if high rates of things like schizophrenia and among boomers, for instance, like if there's some kind of like off thing, like even in my own town, there's a abnormally high rate of like kind of like loner men who have clear mental health problems, but you know what I mean? Like there's something about that. Like, I don't know, the boomers, they are sort of like a weird like techno mind generation in terms of like when you're speaking to them, you're speaking to the television.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know that phrase? Yeah. But with David Icke, though, I know that Fritz Springmeier, for instance, that's an old head name that I know that he was inspired by. What was his book? I actually have his book. I actually bought it from Infowars, I think.
Mindslave of the Illuminati or whatever the hell?
Yeah, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Yeah, that one. Yeah. And a lot of people doubt his genealogy and they say like he was a charlatan, he went to prison and blah, blah, blah. But there was a lot of like compelling stuff, even if there wasn't exactly like a perfect thing. But I cut you off. Like, finish your point about David Icke. Yeah.
Well, the thing with like David Icke, right? David Icke, you look at some of the modern stuff that he's writing now. He's talking now about like the 20-year and back program. Like, are you familiar with that conspiracy theory?
I'm actually not familiar with that. What is this? Is it like Agenda 2030 or whatever? Or?
No, these are people that believe that you are abducted as a child. So already starting off to a brilliant, lovely start. You are, or at some point in your life, you are basically drafted to fight aliens on Mars, the moon, or some other celestial body.
Oh, this one, yeah.
You're stage regressed, sent back in time, and you wake up like nothing happened. Which is about as Lovecraftian as you can get. Like you're fighting space Iraq. You're on Barsoom going hog wild, and then you're back.
You're fighting the Zeta Reticuli Taliban. Yeah.
There was a guy that Taliban goes so hard. That's a great band's name.
That was actually, I think, who is the guitarist for Meshuggah? Frederick Thorndahl. He had this album about, I think it was called 22 Zeta Reticuli. But there was this guy. I remember he was like he claimed that he was a colonel or something on the moon or in space, that he was like fighting these aliens. And I believe that's where David Icke, he interviewed him or something like that.
There's been that kind of
yeah.
thing sort of floating around for a while in like UFO circles, like David Jacobs.
Yes, David Jacobs. Yeah.
In his book, The Threat, specific like sits out like 2 chapters saying like, okay, this is what I do, this is how not to do it, and if you don't do it, you're going to wind up with people saying that they were like Admiral Hyper Teuton III on the frigates Meshuggah, pounding down, held from above onto the reptile nests. He makes a point of saying like, yeah, that's ridiculous, that's not happening. Although he does have a
it's
weird...
like the Blade Runner dialogue at the end, like, I've seen things you've never seen before. Yeah.
Yeah. I've clapped alien cheeks no one thought could be clapped.
Ships burning on the side of Venus.
Very, very Hubbard-esque type things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
The weird thing with Hubbard, right? I don't know, because like I haven't delved too deeply into his background. I know that he was buddies with Parsons and that he basically stole Parsons' BPD girlfriend for a time, at least. And I don't... the concept of alien souls being chucked onto Earth is a very, very theosophical idea. That's the basis of theosophy, that the lunar creatures, came down here to reincarnate over and over again until they finally go back to source or God or whatever the hell. I've been rereading Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine, the 2nd volume. It's way weirder than I remember, because apparently, at least Blavatsky believed that Adam and Eve, because God is androgynous, he believed that they were androgynous.
Yeah.
And also each other's both parents and children.
No, I guess before you go further, I wanted to ask you about that, because I think I was talking actually about this with Schwab. There's a lot of people, like, for example, even people that are attuned to this literature on the dissident right, or whatever you want to call it, like, they look at how Blavatsky had like a lot of these like weirdo proto-hippie like gender communism beliefs, and that she was like largely a charlatan or not, and that she was like just cribbing off of a lot of Kabbalah and a lot of more like nefarious influences that then later cultivated in theosophy circles. I wonder, so what would be your, as a reader of Blavatsky, what would be your take on her? I've presented a very negative picture of her, but
that's just true. She's the babushka of hippiedom.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Go further into this. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that like someone like Blavatsky was probably inevitable. There were already people from Europe going into India, finding weird stuff, and then coming back. I forget the name of the guy, but there was a Cossack adventurer who went down to Tibet and said like, "Oh, Jesus went to Tibet," and that's where that idea comes from. Sorry?
Oh, a G.I. Gurdjieff?
No, this is somebody else. This is like a Russian Cossack adventurer. I can't remember.
Nikolai Roerich? No, not Roerich.
No, not Roerich.
No. I did a 3-hour podcast on Roerich. I know it's on the tip of my tongue.
I'll go ahead and look it up real quick. 1 second.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, it's not Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff, I believe, was not
Jesus in Tibet.
Jayish. But yeah, like Blavatsky, you kind of are right. Like the sort of like those like liminal figures, they were almost inevitable in some ways. I mean, even the New Age movement itself was inevitability.
But you know who I'm talking about. And that kind of... Nicholas Notovich.
Notovich, there you go. Yeah.
Life of Saint Isa. But like, I think something like Blavatsky was probably inevitable, and I think a big reason why she got so big was first off due to the sheer ridiculousness of our ideas, but also the fact that she was a woman, and she was a tomboy. That's what she was. Oh, at least a little bit, because she actually traveled. She actually went to these places when it was lethally menacing for anybody to go to, much less a female. Like, if you went to Tibet in those days, like, she apparently did, they would just...
Yeah, it was run by a very brutal theocracy back in the day, yeah. they have an inherent distrust of outsiders.
Which is
But
based.
dude, yeah. I mean, they were totally, of course, like again, another ravaged by the Han for out of sheer resentment. But that's all fine. I might have to cut that one. I may have to paywall that statement.
Oh no.
But no, but it's true though. It's true. I mean, come on.
So I think Blavatsky, because I'm reading through her work, and I'm basically like just every time she mentions a work, I'm just putting on my wish list for Amazon because like, oh, that's another rabbit hole I got to go down. Because apparently she drew from the stanzas of Xian. I don't know how you can pronounce it, but apparently like that was part of a bigger corpus itself called like the Book of Su Yi or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head, but something like that was inevitably going to happen. Right. And all that people like to say like, oh, she's evil or whatever. She does lend herself towards like there's a certain air of malevolence about her because she does not like Christianity. It's very obvious in her writing if you know what to look for. Because like for example, she cites Swedenborg quite not frequently, but like the name comes up in the text and she doesn't like him at all. Because like, oh, really? Oh yeah, like when Swedenborg does come up in the text, or like she talks about like spirits from other worlds, she says like, yeah, Swedenborg was wrong about all this. Which is like, I'm sitting there like, is this a diss track from a bygone age? Why do you hate Swedenborg? He's literally the sweetest guy you could encounter.
Well, but it's interesting because Swedenborg,
she's also pro demiurge. She views the demiurge as basically you know how in Zoroastrianism they turned the devas and the asuras into demons when in the previous religion they were angels. She views that and Lucifer as, if I'm understanding her right, as basically falling victim to the same thing.
Yeah, like in Zoroastrianism, what's the Ahura Mazda, right? That's like the demonic figure.
No, Ahura Mazda's the good guy.
No, not Ahura Mazda. What's the other one? Yeah, Ahura Mazda is the good one. The demonic figure is it's been a while. I forget the exact name. I apologize if there's any Zoroastrians listening. But yeah, like she did have a lot of that antinomianism.
Yeah, all 5 of them are going to be so fake.
But she did yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I interrupted.
Well, I was going to say like she does even like Charles Upton was saying this in an interview recently that she has like this strong antinomianism that unfortunately was placed in a lot of theosophical circles, and she was sort of like I hate to bring this up because I think they buried the hatchet, but this was like an old phrase where Alex Jones, he called David Icke the turd in the punch bowl. But like Helen Blavatsky kind of was like the turd in the theosophical punch bowl because she did have a lot of antinomian beliefs and she did have this like weird like proto-Crowleyan vibe going on, if you will.
I think her and Crowley were alive at the same time, at least for a period.
Yeah.
I don't know if they ever spoke to each other or were aware of each other's. Well, they probably were aware of each other's existence, but I don't know if they drew off of each other.
Was it true she was a lesbian or no? That's just a rumor.
I have no idea, and I don't want to think about that. It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think she was.
There was some kind of implication that she was doing some kind of like X magic type of thing, like Crowley. I'm trying to look a photo. She doesn't look too bad young. I mean, I don't know.
She's my lovely babushka mid.
Yeah, beautiful mystical mid. The dream of every e-girl.
She is the Ayn Rand of mysticism, is what she really is.
Yeah.
Like she has some very interesting, if out there, ideas that are in some ways very interesting, but also very desperately needs a copy editor.
And she has a weird masculine energy similar to Ayn Rand as well.
She's a tomboy.
Yeah.
Also, I can't find much information on this. Apparently, she tried to meet up with Joseph Smith in Illinois at some point, but he died before they could ever meet. which
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't know how true that is. I've heard that rumor a few times, but I absolutely would not be surprised, because from what little I can tell of early Mormon mysticism, and from my understanding of Blavatsky, there are some very weird parallels, because that's what Mormonism and Blavatskyanism is it's basically just an attempt. It's basically perennialism.
Mm-hmm.
It's the worst possible form of perennialism. Like, oh, this is the forgotten wisdom of the ages. We just need to make everything fit together.
And what would be your critique, though, of their particular brand of perennialism? Because I know that there's a lot of different interpretations, whether you're more of the traditionalist school like Gunyan or Kumaraswamy, and then you do have theosophy and Rudolf Steiner and Blavatsky, and there's a lot of different interpretations of like what exactly that hidden wisdom is, or how it was abandoned by modernity or whatever. But it seems that Blavatsky, I think it was actually, I shouldn't even admit to this, because occasionally I will browse what people write about in Compact Magazine. I think Compact Magazine had an article.
I have no idea what compact is.
They're like they're kind of like woke centrist, like Marxist, but we're like trad Marxist. Like they're kind of like they were. Yeah, no, I wouldn't even say that. They were kind of like the post-left, quote unquote.
Oh, that type of people. Okay.
Like like Tink Zorg and
that's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, he's still. I think he keeps getting banned though. But yeah, they had this article about Blavatsky, and they're sort of like. I mean, a lot of people accuse them of being funded by George Soros or whatever, and they do have like a lot of thinkers that will attack the dissident right or whatever. But they had this article about how she was like this proto-leftist, and a lot of people that are looking for answers in like perennialism or whatever. Like she's sort of like this weird detour. I'm trying to look it up, but anyways, yeah. Go ahead with your take on what were we talking about, Blavatsky and Mormonism.
Well, you look at like Mormonism, okay? Mormonism believes that you were born in a previous non-material life through sex between God and one of his hot wenches up in heaven. Your soul got placed inside your mother, and then you were born into the world, and you have a duty to basically, through an almost Nietzschean fashion, build yourself up, build your own values, seize your destiny, and when you finally die with your wife or your wives, in some instances, you become God yourself, or a God yourself, and you repeat the cycle. Which is very weirdly similar to Blavatsky stuff, which is just, it's that, but on a long, whereas Blavatsky stuff is, oh, you can't do this in a single timeline. You can't do this in a single lifetime. You need to go over like hundreds or thousands of years of being dying, being born again in the same root race again and again and again until your soul is, I guess, good enough to return back to God, which is really odd. Also, you go into the post-Smithian mysticism with the idea of the Adam-God doctrine, where they believed Adam and God were the same being in the Garden of Eden, which is weirdly similar to the whole androgynous or Eve is actually my daughter thing from Blavatsky.
Yeah, the divine andrine, yeah.
I feel like the divine andrine stuff, like it keeps coming up again and again. Like even Christian Science believes in that. They don't say God, they say Father, Mother, God.
Oh, really? Eh?
Oh yeah, it's really weird. Like I feel almost like Mary Baker Eddy wanted to build a cult, but she couldn't quite force herself to that step. And you look at all these people, right? They all lived around the same time period. Crowley, Blavatsky, Steiner, Mary Baker Eddy, the Adventists, all of them were active around the same, like, I don't know, 50-year time frame. It's really odd. I don't know I don't know if it's an industrialization thing or a deterritorialization thing brought on by techno capital. I don't know. But for some reason, all these people were active around the same time, more or less. or at least interacted with people from around that time frame. Like you look at the Wiccans, like the Wiccans were buddies with Crowley, as one example. What's his
Yeah,
name?
the
Gardner had
one.
a law, was given permission to build a lodge from Aleister Crowley. You can look this up.
Man, that's crazy. I'm trying to find this article. I can't find it. It was like a month ago or so. But it is weird how a lot of these key figures, whether it's Steiner or Blavatsky or so forth, how they at least had like a nominal relationship with each other, and they did interact, and like even the perennialists, like they did have like Kumaraswamy knew Rabindranath Tagore, which is actually a subject of a painting that I'm doing currently. I'm almost done.
All right. Keep it up.
Yeah, and then it's a painting of like them two and two of Kumaraswamy's ex-wives. One of them was his Jayish art ho dancer, Stella Blosh, and another was Agna Rattan, who was an English woman that became one of the key British historians and musicians of ragas music in India.
Are you just making like pulp book art covers at this point?
I should. I would definitely make more money if I did that. Yeah.
What's the name of the artist that was so famous for them?
Frazetta?
Frazetta. You should be like a modern Frazetta.
Well, I don't have that level of skill. Like I don't have like Frazetta or Vallejo skill, but I have done book covers before. But yeah, it's very interesting how even the perennialists they shared a lot of like different connections with each other, even with Evola. But of course, like, you know, Evola's legacy has been like totally plastered over by a lot of people for obvious reasons.
Basically refused. I only have the one book by Evola. The what is it?
Revolt Against the Modern World?
No, it's Eros and the Mysteries of Love.
Oh, that one, yeah.
Because all the hippies like it, apparently.
Yeah.
But
then he cites Vinegar, and
I refuse to read Ganal because Ganal has horrible physiognomy and he became an Arab.
He transmogrified into an Arab man.
Him, Evola, and Lovecraft all look the same.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. But there was so at this time there was all of these thoughts going around, and I know that a lot of people, they like to trace a lot of like theosophic literature back to Kabbalah, and that's basically like the root foundation of a lot of Western mysticism. But I wonder if there's more to the story than that, or if they were just basically purely subversive or not.
I've heard the idea that Blavatsky was popularized or allowed to do what she did because by the Russian government, or she was paid off to do it in part because her big thing was giving the Indians independence, or that's who she tended to attract. And this was in the midst of the Great Game. So it makes sense that you would want to popularize somebody amongst the Indian subcontinent and abroad if you wanted to weaken your greatest rival like that. So right. I don't know if that's the case, because she was very weird even from a young age. Apparently, like, she went and visited the Kalmyks down there. Do you know who they are?
I've heard of the name, but refresh my memory.
They're a small group by the Volga River. Well, not a small group. They're a population by I believe the Volga River near the Caspian Sea, who were chased there by the Mongols trying to escape them. And they're all Buddhists. They're all like Vajrayana Buddhists. And they didn't escape, but they got pretty damn far. And they're genetically tied to like to East Asia. So you just randomly have these Buddhists just doing their thing in southern Russia. So she went and visited them, got not disillusioned with Christianity, at least that's how the story goes, and then started doing her thing.
That's actually similar to Rorish, how he got funding both by the Soviets and by the American government. Like, he managed to create these very elaborate expeditions, and a few of them failed, but he really didn't have, he wasn't like a political side taker. It was all just about the mission of finding Shambhala. But there has been a lot of accusations that these groups were essentially funded by different political factions for various purposes, like, for example, empowering the Indians against the British Empire. But I managed to finally find the article, which is kind of got a ridiculous name. It's by Adam J. Sachs and Compact Mag, called "The Esoteric Wokeness of Ancient Aliens," and it talks about Graham Hancock. Yeah, it talks about Graham Hancock, precursor race that presumably arrives from another planet. The super civilization perished in unknown catastrophe, and of course, like, to Compact Mag, they're like, woke centrists. So like, oh, that's like, that's like red pill Austrian painter stuff. That's terrible. Then they say, like many of today's red pills, there's a metastasization of the Enlightenment dictum to think for oneself. The resulting worldview is both anti-Darwinian and post-secular. There's also a sort of esoteric wokeness, a pessimistic politics of the oppressed, according to which elites have deprived humanity of the grandeur of spiritual backstory. The pseudo-archaeology information in the Ancient Aliens series. Then they link it back to Blavatsky. Atlantis Metaphysics Center in Sedona, Arizona, was a casualty of the pandemic. Is now online only. We still offer sacred temple work connected to the Ancient Aliens. Then let's get to the part about Blavatsky. Oh, here we go. Theosophy has its roots in the profound reaction to secularism and Darwinism, initiated by the movement's founder, Helen Petrovna Blavatsky. This Russian maverick intellectual discarded Darwin, but also all manners of Victorian norms and assumptions. Her rejection of Eurocentrism later led to Gandhi to praise her for having disabused me of the notion fostered by the missionaries that Hinduism was rife with superstition. In her book, Isis Unveiled, Blavatsky founded the global corpus of ancient wisdom literature from Pythagoras to the Bhagavad Gita, a fount of insight and spirituality surpassing those of modern civilization. She thus rejected the notion that the highest reaches of human faculties could be arrived at via any system of evolution. Blavatsky's 1888 magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine, elaborates this grand narrative in a manner parallel to Marx's pivot between the economic and philosophic manuscripts to Capital. She pivoted from philosophic criticism to a broad-based spectrum, structural and dynamic theory of history. She couldn't escape the omnipresent language of race, ambiguous in her day, but sought to edit the reference point where Buddhist texts that speak of various successive earths, referring to humanity as a single collective that has been manifested in several race earths, preceded by the astral bodied or human in spirit form. She shifted her response to Darwin in an alternative chain of evolution based on this strength of spiritual consciousness. You have to realize something that, yes, Steve, romantic optimism in the 19th century. Blavatsky also proclaimed the new humanity was being born. Her feminism and anti-colonial humanitarian universalism reflects her conviction that humanity may begin again and have another chance. Then, of course, this led to nihilism and pessimism in the 21st century. And so you have to realize that, like, Compact Magazine, a lot of those writers, they're like Sohrab Ahmari, James Lindsay tier. They're like, they were new atheists, but they're like, oh, but the woke has gone too far. But they're also like, we don't like, but it's funny, like, they're criticizing her of ditching Darwin, but they like deeply hate and resent the newer iteration of the E-right that is more or less led by BAP, which is pro-eugenics, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's pro-Darwin, right? So it's like, they're like this confusing mess of like wholesome Chungus communitarianism, but we also love science, and evil Austrian painter right-wingers are Gnostics, and Blavatsky was a feminist. We hate feminism too, but it's like
everything I don't like is Gnostic. Like, shut the like, Jesus.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Like, actual Gnosticism, like, I wouldn't classify myself as a Gnostic. I mean, I joke and say that I am.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, but yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead and ask your question.
Well, well, actually, I'll get to that later because I wanted to talk about Christianity a bit more. But yeah, so their position is that, like, Blavatsky was a proto-lib that rejected Mahek Olson science, but also she was a racist. And so that's like the ultimate enemy for the Sohrab Ahmari. Like, Compact Magazine said his woke racism is like the worst thing ever, right? So it's very much like Dinesh D'Souza, like, they're communists, they're racists, they're Austrian painters, and they're feminists. It's like the worst thing, yeah. What's true though, because there is like white nationalist feminism, but let's not get into that. There's like big nat feminism.
Before. It's just femdom hit all the way down.
And if RFH is listening to this, we're not casting shade. It's just that but anyway, so theosophy's universal fraternity is replaced with a sensational, hyperbolic vision of human helplessness, an omnipresent pessimism that seeds decline as an inescapable horizon. So what they're saying is that the hope and optimism of the theosophy movement in the 19th century and the New Age movement, the human potential movement, which has a lot of, glow-in-the-dark connections, that gave way to sort of like what you were talking about as like conspiracy theory and omnipresent suppression of human knowledge.
Yes.
And so, but it's funny though, because as much as they hate each other, to go back to the thing about the E-right,
they have a love-hate makeout session with each other quite a bit.
Yeah. As much as like the E-right hates Compact Magazine and all of these like Barry Weiss woke centrists, they do share, like when it comes to the criticism of schizoposting, the criticism has been that there is like a lack of agency to presume that these blood families or that these, demiurgic entities that are controlling humanity, that there's like this global conspiracy. They both come to the conclusion that that's robbing us of like real political action, whatever that means nowadays. But what's your take on it as a quote unquote schizo poster? Or have you been labeled as such? Like, what would be your retort to that notion that we can imbibe in actually studying these conspiracies because it's like a human agency suck?
I would say
that leads to nowhere.
I would say that there are things more important than politics.
Right.
More important than money. Unfortunately, for a lot of the population, that's the only thing that realistically matters to any of them. Yeah, like you go to the Gnostics, and I'm not a Gnostic, but when you're right, you're right. That's basically my purview. When you're right, you're right. I don't have to like you to admit you're right about something. As a Gnostic said that a huge segment of the population is obsessed only with sex, money, and status. That's right. The basic of the red pill bullshit. Arguably, is a psyop in of itself. I don't know. Like, oh, just grind harder, dude. Like, is that not something that a malignant demiurge, real or not, would say to you?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, you're suffering. You just need to work harder. That's literally Hinduism. Oh, your life sucks as a Shudra because you can't figure out how to knot your pants? Work harder.
That's unironically what Matt Walsh said today or the other day.
I saw that. What a fuck. Like, it's a shame because he's clearly clever, but he's clever in such a good way.
Never taken off day.
He's smart precisely one way, and that's it. And that's what happens with a lot of these people, is they're smart in 1, 2, maybe if you're lucky, 3 different ways. They have a bit of syncretism. But other than that, they're not idiot savants. They're just stupid. Like, oh, you have a passion. You like to read Wikipedia a lot. Okay. Oh, you bought 1 or 2 books off of eBay because you couldn't find it on Amazon. You realized Amazon sucks. Okay. You're still an idiot. You're just a well-read idiot.
That's like all those like rationalist people like Hanania or Swan Marcus. It's like, I really hate black people, but I'm like a race realist, but I hate the white chuds even more. So I'm basically like a libtard. Yeah, it's like,
yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do a hot take here. You can and should hate both.
Really?
Like look at the Israel-Palestine stuff to make things a little bit political. Why do I have to pick a side? Why can't I just say I want both of them? Why do I have to pick? Oh, the poor people are blowing each other up. It's like you realize that the only reason you support the Israelis is because you can see what they're doing, right? If the Palestinians had more cameras and were doing that to the Israelis, you would be supporting them. A contrarian is just as mind controlled as a normie, just in reverse.
Yeah, that's why I don't really vibe with the whole like ironic Zionism just to like own the like Palestinian, like the pro-Palestine like woke libs. Like
it's like no matter who wins, they're all coming here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Either like you get like either like Israel.
It's literally an ocean. It's literally an ocean away from both of us. Why is this my problem? Like if you were in
Well,
Italy
they'll make
or
it your
Greece,
problem. That's the problem. They make it
like
your problem.
if you were in
Yeah.
Italy or Greece or somewhere like that, okay, that makes sense. That's a neighbor. It isn't. Maybe it's just because we live in a hyper globalized hell world. I don't know. Clown world,
Well,
cruelty squad. I don't know.
well, yeah. I mean, it's because, of course, it's because America's subservience to Israel in terms of foreign policy. So that case can be made that we have to care about it because all of the stuff that's happening, we are like the American elites are essentially facilitating it. But that being said, like, yeah, it's like both sides. They don't like either you're gonna get like mass radicalized Palestinian immigration into Europe and even North
Oh,
America. No, but to circle back though, they yeah, so like you were saying, like James Lindsay, not James, yeah, I guess James Lindsay, but like Matt Walsh, it's ironic that he does this like Daily Wire, like macho, I smoke cigars and have a beard, but he really is sort of like what they call the M2M, the male to male trans, and it's very funny how he's doing like, oh, if you take a
oh
sick one,
God!
you're not a real
Don't you remind
man.
me of that?
Yeah.
The fake
Yeah,
machismo stuff.
are you? Yeah. That's no, but it's very funny because it is like a weird reification of like the Protestant work ethic. That's as a Mediterranean, I kind of balk at that. I don't know, but it's like
Yeah, you have the right
so,
response.
but you were saying like the red pill, like a lot of that stuff, like the Sigma grind set, it really is sort of like or like unironic, like capitalistic exploitation. It really is sort of like a weird form of spiritual inversion, and
Oh
that's
yeah,
like that's what you're focusing on, yeah.
my basic theory right now that I'm kind of like I got like a dozen that I'm always like circling through is that the observation of human behavior and the accumulation of that information, and it's going faster and faster now because of not only the internet but drones or whatever flying around, is that it has advanced to so much of a point that, and this is what the key point of the situationists, they thought of all this before I did, is that communism and capitalism have basically merged together more or less into a singular globular entity because they want a captive market. They want to keep people captive. The best way to do that is to create basic archetypes of people, but first you have to figure out what those archetypes are. So the result is you basically take all of human consciousness and just look at what people say amongst each other. Look at what they say in private when they feel like they're comfortable. This is something that I do. This is why I can't stand it. And if you can figure out what basic archetypes of people exist, you can then modify collective human behavior. You don't have to modify the individual so much as you have to modify the group at that point. So these people have basically taken a crystal ball of the human mind, smashed it against the ground, pissed on it, and then reassembled it into a new hideous form. And same Sutton, Anthony Sutton, I think.
Anthony C. Sutton, yes. You wrote
that was his point. That was his key point.
Yeah, Wall Street and the Rise of the Austrian Painter, Wall Street and the Rise of the Bolsheviks. Yeah.
The weird thing with that, right, is Sutton said that, like, the people of Wall Street finance Hitler. That's true. Hitler basically then kicked out the banker that was in charge of his country. I forget his name, and installed, I think it was Goering, to be in charge of it. So Hitler took their money and ran. So there's a non-zero chance that the reason World War II happened was because Hitler went rogue.
Yeah.
Which is a terrifying idea.
Well, fascism was destroyed from outside rather than inside. Like the
the thing with command economies is that they're very, very efficient in the short term, but they don't really work in the long term. That's why you need free markets.
You need innovation, or a pipeline of innovation, in other words.
Yeah, you even look at the command economies of the USSR. The only time they ever made anything really interesting was towards the start and towards the end, when nobody was keeping track of the money as well.
Right. Yeah, even architecture. Like there's that book about late Soviet modernism, and it's because like all these innovative like arts like architectural students, they were being commissioned to do these buildings. They were always in like provinces and the satellites where it's like commissars they didn't exactly care what they were doing. So they're like, yeah, just commission all this like thousands of tons of concrete and just like go for it. Yeah. Nobody cared what they were doing at the time.
Yeah, that's basically what Hollywood is doing right now. It's just money laundering.
Yeah. But it's funny how like those points of innovation, they always either come at the beginning or that at the end of a particular order of things or civilization. Like I think even Spengler talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, my basic hypothesis is with that is everybody loves the jester until they're in power, and then they beat the snot out of him, but he never really leaves. And then this jester archetype just kind of appears at points of weakness to just fuck things up, or not fuck up, but just look at things a little bit sideways, and then just kind of just leave whatever bit of art or corpus they've wanted to create, and then just kind of leave.
Mm-hmm.
Like you look at Hermes Trismegistus, that was his whole thing, was making fun of people. You look at Jesus, one of his big things was making fun of people. Even Buddha went around and made fun of everybody. The jester rules the world. He just doesn't realize it.
No, it's true. Like when Gautama Buddha was like cribbing from all of these like 1,000 schools or whatnot. Even in the work of art, like even like Soviet animation was like that. They would like have to sneak things in and so forth. But it's true. I mean, the trickster archetype really does become this weird engine of history. But before we get to this, so I wanted to read the last part of this article. You're gonna find this fascinating. This is like Compact Magazine in general. Okay, so the post-truth. I hate that.
Oh God, what a great start.
The post-truth of ancient aliens and ancient apocalypse, meaning that there was a previous civilization that got raptured out of existence, like the Atlantians or Lemurians, further undermines the egalitarian and rationalistic constructed narrative that civilization represents a shared patrimony, one that emerged multiply as a variegated expression of human ingenuity, while appealing to the hunger for grand narratives that make sense of chaos, fragmented worlds. The shows invite viewers into a position of deep despondency about human possibilities, creating
this is Robespierre's God cult. That's literally what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Cult, like during the French Revolution, they said, "Oh, cult of the supreme being." This is cult of the supreme Alameo.
Yeah. No, but that's what they're saying, though. They're saying that, and it is true that the ancient alien thing does rob humanity or ancient humans of potentiality.
Oh yeah, that's one of the reasons
But you have to realize that these people are doing
It's probably true to some extent, but people grossly. It's one of those things. Like whenever people discover something new, like electricity, or I don't know, the Venus of Willendorf statuettes that are all over Europe and the Near East. Mm-hmm. They take that one thing and then they try to apply it to absolutely everything to see what sticks.
Right. Yeah.
And then they kind of forget about it. The same thing happened with animal magnetism with Franz Mesmer. And we're still figuring out the long-term repercussions of that. What do you think psychotherapy is? It's just hypnotism, just in a very, very scientified, not paranormal form. Deep paranormal.
Sigmund Freud saw a hypnotist. That's where he got a lot of his theories from. Yeah. But both him and the psychotherapist before him, or proto-psychotherapists like Arthur Grodek, they were all into hypnotism. They were all into theories of both animal and human magnetism.
And there's a lot some of these names because I got to look through this stuff. This is the first.
Well, if you look at, there's a lot of literature in academic philosophy on the influence of Henry Bergson onto psychoanalysis and Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud, that he definitely saw a hypnotist, but he was like this weirdo like fedora tipper who's like, I don't believe in all that stuff. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And so, but he like, unfortunately, like Heidegger, he was very good at like burying his influences because like, no, I actually did all this. So yeah, so
he's one of those. Well, that makes sense. I don't know why I didn't see it before.
Yeah, well, there was I believe there was a very popular hypnotist that Sigmund Freud consulted with at the time. And then, of course, I believe it was when he moved to London because of the Second World War. When did Freud die? He had to flee Freud death.
The English are a very, very powerful group of people. They were the first group to really sort of deterritorialize themselves from their own history and reterritorialize themselves via industrialization.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He had to flee to London. I believe. Yeah, he died in 1939. So
really, okay, he died way later than I thought he did. I thought he died at 20.
Yeah, no, I thought he died in the 20s too. I forget why he had to move to London, but I think it was because of
because everybody hated him. Because, well, wasn't his original thesis that the elites of Austria were actually molesting their daughters?
It was something. Yes, it was something like that. Yeah.
The weird thing is, like, no matter which version of the theory you think is true, you're right both ways.
Yeah, he was. He made a lot of enemies in Vienna.
It all goes back to generational cults.
Exactly. Yeah.
I literally have a book over here. I need to read it. It's called Incest and Influence, and it talks about the bourgeois of England and how they would abuse their kids and like incestuously, keep the money in the family type of thing.
Well, yeah, non-scov was there for multiple generations. Yeah, the British ruling class was always run by PDF files. Yeah, I was right, actually. It was, PDF files, the YouTube OPSEC term. So in 1938, Austria was taken over by the Austrian painters, and Freud family had to flee. Freud had a lot of friends in London, and so he, that's why he moved to an apartment in London. So yeah, that he had to flee because, as we know, Freud was one. Yeah, so he died shortly after, though.
The weird thing with that, right, is like Freud did not consider himself.
No, he did
that identity completely. He considered himself a German, just an atheist.
Yes, yeah. He actually hated a lot of superstition and so forth. Like he couldn't stand rabbis and yeah. But he had to flee nevertheless when they took over Austria. But yeah, Freud was consulting with all these people. But what I was going to say about Compact Magazine is that you have to realize that it is true that the Ancient Aliens thing, they do undermine the insight of the ancients, but at the same time, they're doing this to like preserve my heckin' wholesome Chungus liberal democracy. They're like, oh, well, if we give into like, this is like what the far right does. They love conspiracies, even though if you look at like the modern Democrat platform, it's all basically just conspiracies. Like they were talking about this in Night Owls the other night. Like, yeah, like they believe in like sundown towns and the
I'm convinced sundown towns are like the monster in the woods myth for black people.
Yeah.
Like, don't go out at night because don't go out at night. You'll get lynched. Don't go out at night. You'll get eaten by the forest demon. It's like, it's not real. Maybe there was an element of truth to it at some point, but it's not real anymore. Like,
there's this viral
tweet that this guy that like was hung in a tree, like he was lynched. No, he killed.
He sunsetted. Yeah.
Oh God.
There was this this viral tweet the other night about like, this is a map. I've mapped thousands of sundown towns in America, and like they're like TikToks about it that go like super viral, or like Black Twitter, they have maps of sundown towns in America. Like it's like official Democrat Party policy, but yet Republican chuds are like the real conspiracy theorists or whatever. But
I mean, I don't doubt the possibility that some sundown towns maybe still exist. I mean, I still think exists. But like, you can't go. It's like, okay, you want to play this game of places where it's not safe to be for certain demographics? Okay, go to Springfield. Let's go to Springfield and see how that happens. Go ahead as a honky. Go ahead and go to Detroit. See what happens. You're gonna get your ass.
a white guy walking in
Well, go to
Detroit in the middle of the
O-Block. Go to
night.
O-Block without Obama, squeezing your ass and telling you everything's okay. See what happens. You're gonna get your ass whooped.
Yeah, or worse. But
Oh,
yeah,
you're
so
not gonna be just whooped, but we're not gonna go there.
yeah. No, but like you were saying, the ruling class in the UK have always been run by nonces. That's a known fact.
The Normans. If you want to go down a rabbit hole, just follow the Normans. Like was it that guy's book, like Suno, where he goes into detail about the Normans?
Yes, yeah. He I actually have that PDF. So
I need
it's
to
like
reread
1,000
that. It's been ages.
But so this book you were saying, it's about how there was sort of like a toleration of incest. There was I don't want, like, again, I don't really traffic in like the anti-Anglo stuff that was very popular in the E-right years ago, but I think there's a more nuanced picture. But it is true, like even Sir Richard Burton, who wrote who did like his whole like was like the world's first ex-blogger who would like talk about all of his trysts in the third world. He wrote about how incest was tolerated among the British ruling class in the Victorian age. And I don't know if it's true or not, but like he wrote about how it was like this sort of like, it wasn't like outwardly tolerated, but it was like, you know what I mean? Like it was sort of like a thing that people did if you were like a lord.
It's a thing weird people do that we kind of got to deal with, but can't really get rid of.
Exactly. Yeah. Same with the nonce problem in the British government. It was like, oh, people knew about Jimmy Savile. People knew about different lords who were engaged in this stuff, but it's like, oh, it's just one of those things that we have to tolerate, sort of deal. There was this woman actually that said that she was trafficked by a lot of high officials in the British Parliament. But yeah, so but you were saying like that leads back into a greater spiritual truth, I guess you could say, about the ruling classes.
My basic theory is that the discovery and subsequent settlement of the Americas, especially North America, completely broke the ancient dialectic. Because previously it was just the furthest west you could go was probably Iceland, and the furthest east you could go, was either Japan or like part of Indonesia or somewhere like that. And for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, for the most part, that was basically it, aside from maybe some level of input from sub-Saharan Africa every now and again. Discovery of America completely destroyed that axis. So I think that the old world elites, whether they consciously realize it or not, want to destroy, at the very least, just the United States, if not the entirety of the New World, because we remove their local and international grips on power.
Well, yeah, you had a thread on this about the sort of mapping of ancient history that comes from the Atlantean hypothesis that were created by people, or not, were allegedly discovered by people like Ignatius Donnelly. And you were talking about how you had these root races or civilizations that then experienced a weird ethnogenesis in the Americas. And if you could like go through your basic thesis, that would be great.
My basic idea is that Atlantis as a continent probably existed, probably was around where the Azores was, although the shorelines of various places have probably changed over time because, well, entropy. So, like, we keep finding palaces and things just from the ancient Greeks under the sea. Like, it doesn't take that much of a it's not that much of a push to say that some of it is just a little bit in deeper water under sediment. And I think that Atlantis, and I guess I'm showing my theosophical side here, basically colonized huge segments of the world after a giant population boom. Because I think that they were very, very stratified technologically, maybe even having some off-world contacts. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. Well, you are quoting me on that, but after this population boom of basically the Shudra class, or whatever the lower classes were, they populated parts of the world, grew decadent, maybe, and due to where they were, it's not really a continent. It's just a very large piece of land. That's what a continent meant back then. It meant large, distinct piece of land. So you could technically call Greenland a continent from that perspective. And Atlantis sank due to the, I guess, the greed of the peoples of that time, coupled with natural disasters. The two tend to, how interesting that those two things tend to correlate. People get greedy and then get absolutely gobsmacked by a meteor or whatever.
Yeah, that happened to Rome, actually. Well, parts of Rome, like Pompeii, for instance. That's always the story.
That's basically Chinese history.
Great famines always are on like the linchpin of the transitions between empires, or dynasties in China. But yeah, go ahead. So, but you were talking about in your thread about the Lemurians and the Hyperboreans, which is very popular, even just like as meme fodder among like right-wing circles for multiple decades. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's been a little while since I wrote that, and my views have changed a little bit over time. Atlantis, like the Lemurians, seem to have populated parts of Africa and then parts of Atlantis. And some Africans populated Africans themselves then populated parts of Atlantis. That's basically Donnelly's view. All right.
Right.
And the weird thing is, right, and to go off on a bit of a tangent, there's a non-zero possibility that Ivan van Sertima, do you know who he is?
I don't think I know who he is.
He's the guy that said that black people made it to the Americas before Columbus and started the Olmecs.
Oh, he's the whole like thing about Jacob and
well, not Jacob. He was. There's a non-zero chance that maybe he was a theosophist. I don't know for sure, but those ideas are very eerily reminiscent of it. Maybe
he was like the first, like Hoteps follow him.
Yeah. Hoteps love him.
I remember in the podcast I used to be on, we actually interviewed Hotep Jesus, and he was talking about Ivan van Sertima. Well, yeah. But yeah. So go ahead.
So I think the Atlanteans settled huge segments of the world, died, sank into the sea, huge cataclysms. Hold on, I'm going to pull up my thread because I forgot some of it. I'm not beating the allegations of being stupid, am I?
No, you sent it to me, so it'll be in the DMs. Yeah.
Oh, that one. Okay, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Let me just refresh myself with my own chicanery.
But so he asserts that before Columbus that there was Africans in America, and he said like a lot of them like interbred with the Olmec and so forth. And
they were the Olmecs. He thinks they were the ruling class of them. That's why their heads are like have the big lips or whatever. That's literally his argument. These guys look like us a little bit. I don't know. I think maybe it's possible that some Africans maybe had some colonies in America.
Yeah.
Maybe not terribly influential, but I think they were here. Same as the Caucasians.
Yeah, but then he said that there was like a weird like race interbreeding between North American indigenous people and Africans, and that's why there's so many people who are African Americans who have like indigenous blood in them through genetic tests. And I mean, there were natives that owned slaves, for instance, but that's probably where it came from. But they're like, no, that's not true. It's like we were the ruling class. But how does this relate to?
I've gone down that Hotep rabbit hole multiple times. Like, there's a weird oversection between it and the Tartaria stuff.
Yeah,
weirdly enough.
Yeah. But how does it relate to the Atlanteans, though?
The Atlanteans, I think, the Africans in Atlantis probably lived in the south. Probably, they probably lived in the southern islands or the southern section of Atlantis. Not necessarily, maybe dominant locally, but I don't think they ran the thing. I don't think there were nearly enough of them there. Probably imported for labor. Probably soldiers to some extent. That's why people find sometimes weird skeletons in parts of Europe. that don't really make any sense, but they're not white, they're not really Cro-Magnon, they're not really black, they're just kind of there. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. Where's my thread? I can't find it. No, my schizo posting. Where'd you go? Did you mean the sixth root race one in North America?
Yes, yeah, the American that one.
That
Yeah.
one. Okay, I was thinking of something completely different. Sorry, I completely lost where I thought. I'm just drawing a full blank.
Well, that they spread out throughout the world more or less throughout, and they created this like Eurasian steppe between Eastern civilizations, and then eventually this culminated into not modern, but like this culminated into European civilization.
Yeah.
Influences,
I think they set up colonies in places like the Urals, and then
yes.
When Atlantis collapsed, well, obviously you can't really go back home, so they kind of degenerated back into, they returned to the Bronze Age mindset in the Urals, and then just went hog wild, conquering everything, starting everything over again. They were Atlanteans, and through the spread everywhere else, they became the Aryans.
And this is the basis of like Nordicism, like mystical Nordicism, that the Aryans spread through the Indus Valley, and that they were responsible for the Rig Vedas, and I know that Donnelly believed that most of the Hindu gods were essentially just like the higher representatives of Atlanta, and that's actually who they were worshiping.
They're not. The thing is they're not entirely wrong, but you focus on that thing so much that it makes me hate you. So I'm not going to listen to anything that you have to say.
I mean,
like if you believe in something, that's cool. But if you start getting like super emotional about it,
to where you're like Italians are black people, like it's
like the people that get like viciously angry if you understand the idea but still disagree,
right?
Or disagree with what you do with it.
So you wouldn't be a Nordicist, in other words. You're not like that vibe.
I wouldn't be a Nordicist in the sense that I'm a Sweetaboo.
Right.
I'm not a Nordicist in the sense of like, oh, the Nords built everything around the world. No, they probably didn't. But somebody that looked like them to some degree probably built a lot more than we think. Right. What's his name? Alaric has been publishing some stuff or republishing some old books from, and he's a good buddy of mine. I love the guy.
Yeah.
Alaric the Barbarian. He's been republishing a bunch of old stuff from the Americas, saying like, oh yeah, there were Caucasians here, or at least Caucasian-like peoples that got wiped out by disease or something. Right. I think my basic view of the Americas with that is I think America was basically an island, populated initially by Atlantean peoples, possibly replacing the natives that were already there, which then got destroyed by subsequent waves of immigration via Beringia, possibly from other places as well, before the Europeans showed up and what was left off.
The great like, they have the whole thing about they say that was, there's like modern like libcuck historians that are like, oh, that never happened, it wasn't a genocide, it was like purely, but anyways, go ahead.
I think that over time, well, one of the best examples of like old world contact that I haven't seen anybody refute, and I'm not saying that nobody has tried, I just haven't seen too much of it, is the haplogroup X mitochondrial DNA, which exists amongst the Druze and some Syrians, that is present in Native Americans in places like Quebec. How the hell did that get there? I don't know how it got there. Maybe, some lady went around, had like 50 kids with all the natives and then died, and that's how it got there. Some Jew, rode the cock carousel a little too much or something.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. Like that's there is like a lot of genetic anomalies that can't be explained by the sort of like mainstream origin story of the Americas.
The Americas have never, or the Americas are an isolation room, but it's a very bad one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but then you were saying that this sort of Atlantean, then later Aryan European influence spread to the Americas.
Yes.
And and your thread goes through all of these interesting devices of civil, like these social technologies that aided in the American ethnogenesis that the old world didn't possess. So, like you were saying, like the collapse of monarchies, the decentralization of religion, the letting in of Irish, Italian, Black people, that this created like unique selection pressures that Europeans didn't possess, that then would create what we know today as the global American empire or whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe that that Europeans are on the verge of collapse. I think that I think that because the further east you go, generally speaking in history, the more despotic things become.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that Europe is devolving because Europe is effectively the new East because America broke the dialectic.
Mm-hmm.
America
Mm-hmm.
is the new West.
Thank you for listening to the Content Minded podcast, where every Wednesday there are interesting guests, amazing ideas, solo streams, and discussions on a diverse array of topics from art, philosophy, history, and more. The free version will be available both here on YouTube and as a downloadable link on Anchor and Spotify, as well as on Substack. Each week, the full, uncensored, and spicier version will now be available on both Patreon and Substack, where you will have access to the full archive of both Content Minded and of Giant Reviews, where I break down interesting texts every week, including other exciting paywalled articles and good content. Thank you all. Please like, share, and subscribe. God bless. Goodbye. Help keep the content renaissance alive. Too sweet.